Howdy folks, how are you? I'm just about to do the tasting on the new Novalager yeast. This is the beer I brewed back on the 3rd of February. So we're now the 27th. So it's 24 days since brew day. So it's pretty quick to be getting into a lager, and I could have been drinking this a little bit quicker. But anyway, here we are. So quickly, before we get into it, big shout out to Little John's patrons. Guys, thank you for your support, as always. There's a link down the bottom if you're interested, check it out. If you subscribe to the channel, thank you very much. If you aren't, hit the subscribe button down there under the video, and ring the bell so you don't miss anything. And as always, if you like what's going on, give Little John a thumbs up. Novalager, the new hybrid lager yeast, the miracle the brewing world has been waiting for. If you want to believe the word to some degree, it has been getting a lot of hype and a lot of attention. I've seen a few people up to now who've done brews and reviews, and they've been mostly the brew shops who've obviously got their hands on the yeast before most of us have. For a while it was only available in the 500 gram bricks. I think they were retailing for around $300 a hit, so wasn't too many home brewers lashing onto that too early. So it seemed to be like the brew shops and things were knocking out brews. So I got myself some, and here we are. Brew day, up the top corner, jump on the link to there. Just a fairly simple lager I've brewed up, and going with the information I gleaned from reading and investigating the Novalager, I've brewed and fermented as best I can to allow for a combination of ideal and what most brewers are going to be comfortable and going to be working with. And again, there's some discussion on that brew day video around the science and how this yeast particularly works. Main thing is, for now, is that it's not a direct replacement for what lager yeast are there now. It's an alternative. It's another option, and that needs to be allowed for within your brewing if you're going to go with it. But for now, let's just see how this has produced the beer. How has it done? And this is the beer. So this has been on keg now since the 14th. So it's now 13 days. Originally I did a tasting video on this on Friday. But it was a little bit long-winded, and so I thought I'd sit down and do one that's a little bit more concise. So 14, as I said, yeah, 13 days in the keg, so just under 2 weeks. It's not holding much in the way of a head, but again, that's not necessarily a uncommon thing with lager yeast, and that's something you'd look up within a recipe. But I said, simply just looking at how the yeast itself has performed, this beer is reasonably crisp. It's definitely got a lager feel, there's no doubt about that. Ferment happened fairly quickly. The material says can ferment in 5 days. This had finished in 5 days. It had dropped, it started off at 1052. After 48 hours it had dropped to 1034. Another 24 hours it had dropped to 1020. So it dropped 32 points in 3 days, that's quick for any yeast, really. I mean, your typical ale yeast is looking around that same sort of mark. So effectively, this is the sort of ferment profile that you are getting with the Nova. This, I said, this was done at 13, 14 degrees. So it wasn't, right down there in lager temperatures, but it wasn't up in ale temperatures either. So it still required some temperature control. And I'm going to play a bit later down the track with doing it at sort of more at ambient or standard sort of more at ale temperatures to see how it performs up there and whether it can take out the need for a lot of brewers actually needing temperature control, which is one thing I don't recommend regardless, but it's something we will look at. But the ferment went quite hard the first 3 days. Had a big krausen, about 3-inch krausen, highly active ferment. I said, dropped that 32 points in 3 days. But by day 5, end of day 5, it was at 10, 12, which is terminal gravity. That's where it finished. So it didn't change after that. So effectively, it had finished at day 5. At that point, I let it go for another 3 days. I let it go 8 days at that 13 degrees, and then I cold crashed for 3 days. So 11-day ferment. That's quick. That's a good ferment for a lager. And as I said, I could have probably got it to cold crash anywhere up to 3 days earlier. And I originally planned a 2-day cold crash, ended up doing 3. So my original plan was only 10 days, and realistically, I think this could have been done in 8, even 7. And that comes with a big disclaimer. There is an amount of diacetyl in this beer. Not much, but it's there. More on the nose than the palate. If you're finely tuned, you're probably going to pick it up a bit more. But I generally am fairly well tuned to pick up diacetyl, and I'm not getting a huge amount of it. I'm not getting any green apple, maybe a tiny touch of green apple, but I'm not picking up any real other significant fermentation flaws. The beer is crisp. The beer is crisp, it's clean, and it's got those lager characteristics, those lager qualities that we're after. So it has achieved that in a very, very short time. So as it is, it's done a good job. It's done mostly what it's intended to do. It hasn't got rid of all the diacetyl that the reports and the marketing says that you're not going to get. But it's significantly less than you're going to get with a lot of lager yeast, and certainly nothing like you get if you were to brew a typical standard lager yeast at this sort of fermentation profile at this sort of time. Well, to start with, 3470 wouldn't have finished in even the 11 days. The 8 days of the primary ferment before I cold crashed, most lager yeast would have still been ticking along. Granted, they would be cooler. But so I think, regardless of what they're saying about it not producing diacetyl, I think the yeast could benefit from a couple of days at an elevated temperature just to try and overcome that. And looking at the ferment profile, could have easily gone with a temperature raise at 3 days in by 4 degrees up to sort of 17 degrees, and still only gone for the 8 days, gone another 4 or 5 days and then cold crashed. So it wouldn't have made any extension on the length of the ferment that I've done on this beer. I still could have had it done in 10 or 11 days, even with that bit of a de-rest. And I think it could benefit, but again, that's something I may play around with down the track. But if you're using it yourself, I would certainly recommend maybe thinking about it if you've got the potential, if you have the equipment to do it. But for me right now, that is really the only issue I can really pick with the yeast. That is, yeah, that is as lagerish, yeah, as most brewers are ever going to get. And it hasn't taken weeks and weeks or even months. But my standard lager ferment, 3 weeks, then at least 3 weeks conditioning, so at least 6 weeks minimum. I'm at, what did I say? Yeah, under 24 days. Yeah, at the moment. So, massive improvement. So yeah, I certainly say, if you've been put off from brewing lagers, if you avoid lagers simply because they take a long time and there's this difficult process of, you know, having to do de-rests and extended cold crashes and, you know, extended conditioning, get some Novalager and have a crack. Ideally, I think you're still going to want some temperature control. You still want to get it down close to those lager temps, but it's going to run through so much quicker. There was talk about they say it's a medium flocculator, but that's that's a clear beer for 10 days in the keg. Oh, sorry, what did I say now? 13 days in the keg now. It's only 2 weeks in the keg. Be that clear. So I imagine that may drop a bit more with time, but that's fairly bright and clear. It's not, as I say, it's not crystal clear. It's not, well, I was going to say it's not 3470, but I don't think a 3470 can be any clearer than that with that same amount of time. Without having had a good, as we say, a good extended cold crash before going to the keg. It's probably as clean as an S23 or an S189. I don't think it's quite as clean as a 3470 done with a, with a good lager ferment, but we've got to factor in time. Not locking up your ferment fridge, not locking up, keg space in the fridge waiting for a beer to condition. You can knock this out, get it in the fridge and be drinking it at the same time as any other beer you're brewing. That is massive. That's a big thing. So, for me, I'm happy to give this a thumbs up. So give it a try. It still hasn't quite convinced me to get rid of my other lager yeast and the normal lager process, but at the same time I've got the time and the space to do that. If I was sitting here with one ferment fridge and maybe only two taps on keg, that would be a whole different ball game, and that's where I think it's going to win for most brewers, because you are limited. So guys, that's it. I said, yeah, it's definitely a win. It's a positive result. It's actually made a much better beer than I was expecting. I was really expecting to be quite let down with the way it performed. But no, it's done 90% of what the marketing says it will, and I think the other 10%, which is just that bit of diacetyl, I think can be coaxed out of the beer with just a little bit of tweaking to that ferment, without doing any real, without extending how long it takes. So guys, thanks for watching. Any comments or questions, stick them down the bottom. There'll be, I've got couple of packs of the Novalager in the fridge. One pack will be going out to the winner of the lucky Patreon draw for March, which is coming in a couple of days. But for now, Thanks for watching. Cheers for all your support. Until I see you again, we brewing beer, drinking beer, talking beer. Good brewing.